Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a couple of moments. And if you're just joining us, good morning. We'll be getting started with the program in just a couple of moments.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Senator. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our annual legislative forum presented by AT&T and Southern Connecticut State University. This is part 3 in a 3-part series of talking with our elected officials. This morning, we welcome in members of the state Senate. And at the end, we will have some breakout rooms so you can talk with your legislators. And while we'll touch on a number of issues today, our theme is our economic recovery, coming back stronger. First, I want to welcome in our presenting sponsor, John Emra, the president of AT&T New England. And as we've mentioned, every year AT&T has sponsored this event, but it's been a different year. And we appreciate, John, all of your support and AT&T for putting these 3 events on.
Thanks, Garrett, very much. We're really happy to do it. I was joking to Jim Perito before we started that this has become way too much of a habit every Thursday morning seeing him, but it's been great. I just want to thank the Chamber once again for convening this and the other forums you've done, and to thank the members of the legislature who are here too, both for being here this morning and for their continued service. We have, I think, a unique opportunity here in Connecticut to address a lot of really important issues. AT&T looks forward to being, an important voice in that, and to being a resource to members of the legislature as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, and look forward to hearing from everybody this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks again, John. Last year, we were hosted by Southern Connecticut State University, and we hope to be back again there next year. Obviously, this year we're online. This morning, we are joined by Dean Sandy Bulmer, College of Health and Human Services. Sandy, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Garrett. And it is just really a pleasure to be here with you today and to join everyone for this event. On behalf of President Joe, who can't be here today, and all the members of our Southern community, I welcome you to this important event where we'll be engaging with regional legislators on ways we can come back stronger from the pandemic. We're honored to be partnering with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and AT&T in presenting this important forum. We're immensely proud of our Southern faculty, staff, and students who resumed classes on Tuesday of this week. And once again, we'll be engaging with a mix of on-ground, hybrid, and virtual teaching. Despite the unprecedented challenges, our employees have continued to deliver on our mission of providing exemplary graduate and undergraduate education, with that commitment that we always have to access social justice and service for the public good. We're especially proud of our students and our alumni who've been serving as leaders and frontline workers in agencies throughout the state in fields such as education, nursing, public health, and social work. I'm sure you see our students, our alumni out there every day serving our state, and we're just so proud of them. We're a public institution. We graduate nearly 2,000 students each year, and most of them stay and work in Connecticut. So we do understand what a critical role we need to play in coming back stronger from this pandemic. Indeed, President Joe has already started having forums on our campus so that we can talk about what our regional public university is going to look like in a post-COVID world. This past year has been challenging, but I am happy to have this opportunity to share some of the ways we've continued to move forward despite all of these challenges. During your last legislative forum, President Joe talked about some of the work that we've been doing with student support, including our new food pantry and our expanded virtual student services and successful fundraising we've been able to do. Just a heads up, on April 28th, we will be focusing our annual day of carrying on student scholarships because the financial pressures on our students have never been stronger. As Dean for the College of Health and Human Services, we've redoubled our efforts to increase our enrollment capacity in high demand fields such as nursing, social work, and speech language pathology. And we are very intentional about providing more opportunity across all programs, increasing graduation of Black and Hispanic students in order to achieve or exceed parity with the demographic profiles of the Connecticut communities served by those professions. We're also committed to launching new degree programs and continuing education programs, and we welcome your ideas for how we can provide the workforce you need to be successful with your businesses. In healthcare professions, our obstacles to growth are shortages in doctorally prepared faculty, clinical placements, sites for our students, and facilities and equipment for those specialized programs. But I'm pleased to share with you that one of those areas is being addressed. Last winter, we broke ground on our 96,000 square foot building, and you can change the slide for me, Garrett, that will bring all of the disciplines of our college together under one roof. This building has been created with a focus on practice-based interprofessional learning. Special features include 4 large nursing labs, high-fidelity hospital simulations, standardized patient rooms, culinary classroom. We have a large expansion of our communication disorders clinic where we'll be serving many patients from our community. Many people don't know, but we have a clinic currently that serves approximately 120 patients each week. In our new building, we'll be able to greatly expand that and expand the services that we provide. We enter the semester with the same commitment to health and safety that all of us have made throughout this pandemic. The Greater New Haven region is a very special community, and we are proud to partner with you. We welcome our legislative delegation to today's forum, and again, thank you for having us today.
Thanks, Sandy. We appreciate it. We'll get started in just a moment. I do want to thank our other sponsors. A big thank you to ACES, Alexion, Asa Abloy, Halloran Sage, and PSEG. You see them up on your screen now. We could not put on this event without their support, and many of them have been with us for many of these programs. Chamber has been able to be a valuable resource in no small part to our annual investors as well, and you'll see those companies on your slide on the screen. We always appreciate their support as well. These are the real foundational partners of the Chamber, and the support they provide supports all of our operations that we do throughout the year. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Jim Perito, a partner at Halloran Sage, and Jim is also the chair of our Government Affairs Committee, and I want to thank our Government Affairs Committee that has helped us put this event together and work on questions, and we'll be working on a lot more issues as we get into the legislative session. We're now going to have our state senators. You can turn on your cameras if you had them off. Jim will moderate questions. We will take questions from the audience. You can put those into the chat, but Jim, I'll get it right over to you.
Great. Thank you, Garrett. Good morning, senators. I see a lot of faces that I know and that we've had the opportunity to do this in the past. Some new senators, and it's great to see you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Sandra and John, for sponsoring this again this year. I do miss having us all in person, but this is the next best thing. So glad to see you're all healthy. So let's get right into it. Some of our segments in our economy have been completely devastated, more than others, depending on where they're in. The federal stimulus has been passed. More may be on the way. Connecticut has offered its own programs. As a legislature, what types of acts are you looking to try to put through early on in the session to get the most devastated small businesses back up and running? And probably start with Majority Leader Senator Looney.
Well, as President of the Senate, Jim, it's good to be with you this morning and with my colleagues. And I'd like to give a special shout out to my dear friend, John Emra, whom I've known for about 35 years since he was a successful campaign manager for a number of state legislative campaigns in the greater New Haven area. So good morning, John, and thanks for hosting this for us once again and sponsoring it. one of the key elements, Jim, of course, is that we are going to have to wait and see what happens with the next phase of federal stimulus. Thankfully, the Democrats won both of the U.S. Senate races that were contested in Georgia on January 5th, which means I think we're likely to see a more robust stimulus plan sponsored by the Biden administration and with a chance to pass the U.S. House and Senate than might otherwise be the case. Our own Rosa DeLauro now is the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, and I'm hopeful that we will see a robust plan that will also have pass-through grants that will allow the state to provide additional aid to both the small businesses, but also that this funding will directly assist the state and municipalities. Clearly, we have to help small businesses, especially those that have been shut down for significant periods of time or had to have layoffs. Our programs have been targeted in many ways to provide both short-term grants and loans and unemployment assistance. I think we'll continue to do that. Our capacity to do it is going to be dependent to some degree on how robust the next federal plan will be, because in a crisis, of course, the federal government is the only level of government that can engage in deficit spending to deal with the crisis. We're still bound by our constitutional requirement to have a balanced budget. So we are under constraints that only the federal government is not in times of crisis. But I know there is a great deal of concern, in particular, about small businesses who often operate on small margins. Restaurants, in particular, have been struggling to try to stay open and convert themselves to takeout operations. And many of them had limited operations during the summer if they had the space to have outdoor service. Obviously, that's not been possible since the weather got cold. But that's going to be our focus, I think. Small businesses in particular. There's also a concern, I think, for in landlord-tenant law, small landlords who don't own or manage that many units are particularly hurt by the problems of tenants being unable to pay rent. There have been some cases where those landlords have suffered an ongoing loss since the pandemic began last March. We're also looking at additional both landlord and tenant relief programs.
Thank you. Senator Kelly, since you are now the new minority leader, your new face, taking over from Senator Fasano, let's see what your perspective is on what the programs that need to get done for small businesses as we move to this session.
Sure, Jim. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and for putting such a forum on so that we can have conversation and dialogue with our communities. First and foremost, I think it's the role of the state government to first do no harm. Things are tough enough in Connecticut without government making it more difficult. So we have, initiatives before us in the legislature, a $1 million increase on both residential and commercial properties, a little over 400,000. That's going to hit a lot of small businesses and take resources from business in our communities and take them to Hartford. And I think they're better served on the local level. And that's just one example. So we first want to make sure we do no harm. Then what we need to do is start looking at our job environment, where we're dead last in the nation. We need to do better than that. And the way to start doing that is look at what we do best and try to expand and grow that footprint. A couple of things top of mind are a lot of defense industry. We have Sikorsky, EB, Pratt & Whitney, a lot of highline manufacturers that support those businesses. What can we do to help them? As well as our insurance industry. It's a flagship industry. We're the insurance capital of the world. We should be looking to grow insurtech jobs, cybersecurity, rather than competing in direct competition with a new government program known as the public option. Republicans have what's known as a reinsurance program, which can provide the same premium relief that the public option can. But what differs it is that it gets its arms around the cost drivers, the actual cost of medical care, and it keeps good paying Connecticut jobs. And I think that's what's the important factor here, is that we got to make sure that we continue to focus on the jobs and keeping our good, high skilled labor at work. We know that this pandemic has been very difficult and it has created record numbers of unemployment. So much so that we have a federal government that has looked at stimulus. And there have been stimulus packages sent to the state of Connecticut, most recently at the end of December, where we have almost $700 million still sitting on the sidelines. But the problem with the stimulus is that with the executive having all the authority, the people's voice in the legislature has been taken out of that equation. And the governor believes he is the only authority with regards to distributing those funds. And that's problematic for communities such as this, because normally you work through legislators like us to take your issues back to the Capitol, and that voice isn't being heard. So those are some issues that we have to work out and iron out. I certainly would like every voice at the table. And I think when we do, we have smarter policy that works for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. You've raised two things, which I'll get to. I think one about the job situation, the other obviously about the executive orders and the position of the governor and the power that's been vested right now with those executive orders. So let me first turn to the jobs issue. I think you raised some good points. Many of our residents have been on unemployment for over a year now, and their jobs may just not reappear. Are there workforce strategies that you think the state should pursue going forward? Have we given specific thought to the status of the Unemployed Trust Fund that is now in deep deficit and normally would have to be repaid by businesses? The Governor's Workforce Council released an ambitious plan in the fall. Will that be funded? So I'll ask one of the other senators if they'd like to talk about those directions. Senator.
I'll hop in.
Okay,
This is
great.
Senator
Thank you.
Paul Ciccarella.
Thank you.
How are you? And
Good, how are
thank you for excellent. I do apologize if you hear the kids screaming in the background. They're upstairs getting ready for school, so I do apologize. Want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here. As I said before, throughout the process, I had a few times to come and talk to the chamber. I'm also a member, and I truly appreciate what you guys do behind the scenes to put these things together so you can get information to the small businesses. And that proved to be really vital during the PPP process. So again, really appreciate what you guys do. Specifically, the workforce development is something that I talked about throughout the campaign process. Right here in my district, we had a kind of a champion of workforce development, which is Sal Menzo. And, with all of the manufacturing businesses and companies here in Connecticut, they have a lack of staff to choose from and applicants. And as we know, being small business owners, that's probably the hardest part, or one of the hardest part, is finding staff to fill the positions, especially here in Connecticut. Sal Menzo created a workforce development that basically would give high school kids training in basic manufacturing or computer skills that would allow them to come out and start to help some of these small businesses in their workforce problem. And they were able to have good paying jobs with these type of you'd call them careers. And I think we need to really focus more on that. We need to keep some of the talent here in Connecticut. And to do that, we have to make it more affordable and being more friendly to businesses in the middle class. So I think that's really going to be a focus, is to develop the workforce coming out of the high school and the community colleges.
How do we deal with the fact that a lot of the minority-owned businesses have been particularly hard hit during this pandemic? Is there any kind of discussion amongst you all about maybe systemic changes to level the playing field, or to come up with maybe more opportunity zone legislation, since many of our minority businesses are in our urban areas?
I'll take that one.
Senator Maroney, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, and so last session I actually had worked on our opportunity zone legislation, which added state benefits. We created a state opportunity zone czar on top of the federal benefits to make it easier for people to learn about and access those benefits. As you know, we have 72 opportunity zones in 27 municipalities throughout the state. But one of my goals this session has been to follow up and with work on that, in that the way the federal tax code is crafted, the majority of the tax benefits for investing in these opportunity zones accrue to people who do not live within the opportunity zones, right? A lot of it's going to be mixed use developments that are coming from out of state, even investors, and definitely for the most part, people who don't live in that area. So there are a few things I would like to look at us doing this session. One, the DECD is looking at redoing the Small Business Express. in that they will be, instead of the state directly lending, that they will be backing banks and the banks will lend. So to kind of leverage that, what I would like to look at is if we can make it so that for new businesses that start within opportunity zones from someone who lived in that opportunity zone before it was declared such, that they don't have to be in business for a year to be able to access those loans, right? So that you can have new businesses starting there. That's one of the requirements. Two, requiring the DECD to hold office hours. We have small business development centers and others, a number of other great resources that are scattered throughout the state, but making them hold office hours within the opportunity zone so that they can work within those areas to directly advise the people who are starting the businesses. And three, creating mentorship programs. So working through DECD and the Commission for Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity to come up with a list of businesses who are available to help mentor new businesses in those areas. So those are some ideas that I had, and I'm working with others. And I apologize, I see that my friend Senator Winfield had followed the correct process and actually raised his hand, and I kind of jumped the gun on him. So I will cede to him, since I should have let him go first anyways by seniority and the fact that he raised his hand. So thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Winfield, good to see you. If I'd like to have you weigh in on that as well. Thank you.
Good morning, and good morning to all. And James, it's not a problem. I was happy to listen to you, and I agree with you. I just want to kind of try to touch on this question and take a step back as well to kind of talk about a lot of what we just talked about. I think that there's a lot of conversation that to me seems relatively general about what we should or should not do, and that makes a lot of sense given the enormity of the issue. But I think that when states are faced with the type of problem that we're faced with, which is huge, right? And this is not a time, I think, for us to revert to, I think, tried and true ways of talking about things, because they're not going to answer these questions. I think we have to think about what is the structure through which we answer the question before us. And so I think we need to first make sure that we have determined what it is we're looking to do, right? Because we're not just looking to throw money out and help people look like there's something we are intending to do as a state. So we have to do that. And part of the reason for that is because when we think about the allocation of money, there should be a planful way of doing this. I think that once we've done that, we have to figure out, so if we're looking to do a thing, if we're looking to bolster a sector or several sectors, is there financial assistance needed for those sectors? We know that, as Senator Looney said, we know that certain types of businesses were affected by this, what I will call a recession, because that's part of what it is too. It's not just that we had COVID. And so when we talk about those, it's not like construction and manufacturing like the past recession. These are small business, women-owned businesses that don't have banking relationships the way that others do, right? Is there something we specifically need to do there? And what I'm suggesting is that this conversation is largely boiled down to whether Democrats are talking about just doing more, raising more money or not, and whether we're doing harm or not. But you can be doing harm by doing the things that my kid is here, by the way. You can do harm by doing things in a way we have always done them and not being as planful as we need to be. And the other part about doing it in a planful way is how do you analyze for success, right? So you can't analyze for success if you don't know what the actual outcome is. And the outcome isn't just to get money out to businesses, it's to make a thing happen. And so I think as we have this conversation, we need to think about that. And one more thing, I know that I'm eating up time. When it comes to minority-owned businesses and or minority communities or communities of opportunity, however you want to label them, I think we have to think about the different way in which we deal with the monies we're trying to bring in. We have programs that are designed to deal with getting money out to a business, a minority-owned business or something like that. And it helps those people who the program benefits. And what happens is those people do well, they leave that community, they go somewhere else, and the community remains the same. So over time, what we say is there's nothing that's been done for those communities. I think we have to also think about the monies that we are bringing in, new monies that we're trying to generate. What does it do for community development in those spaces? Because that's how you start to get to equity. And it's also good for small businesses because it affects their customer base.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about the pandemic for a moment. Connecticut has actually been doing pretty well in rolling out its vaccines. But obviously, as from the business standpoint, until we get more people vaccinated, we're not going to see a return to normal. people going to restaurants, people having gatherings, things like that. What do you see as the state, as more vaccines become available, what will the state be trying to do to just increase the pace of the inoculations going on? Who'd like to jump on that?
I'm
Senator
happy
Cohen.
to jump in.
Great.
Jim,
Thank you.
thanks. And I may touch on a couple of the other questions
Please.
as well, because I have, I've sort of been thinking a lot about each question as my colleagues have been answering. In terms of vaccines, we have been doing a phenomenal job based upon what we're receiving from the federal government, and based upon, this is all new to us, right? This is a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen before, and figuring out how to administer vaccines to millions of people in what order is yeoman's work. This is the work I don't envy, deciding who will get the vaccine first and in what time period, and how do we coordinate all of this with the manufacturers and, obtain the FDA approvals that we need. And so we're relying heavily on the federal government to really come through for us in those deals and negotiations, and then distribute all of that equitably. Connecticut still ranks 4th in the country in terms of vaccine administration based on the percentage of our population. We've, gotten well over 300,000, I think it was 308,000 doses in arms as of Sunday. Obviously, we've more than exceeded that at this point. And we're learning from the federal government that we can anticipate an increase in the percentage of doses that we'll be receiving. That call came in from the Biden administration to the governors across the country this week. So that's all good news. And we wait anxiously for new FDA approvals on, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, which will, certainly change the shape of things. There's some speculation that numbers are going down because we're slowly starting to see herd immunity. Obviously, it's very, very early, but the good news is we are inoculating the folks that we're losing to this deadly virus. While it's a small percentage of the population, accounts for a huge percentage of the deaths. I think the figure is over 65 accounts for 88% of the deaths due to COVID-19. So making sure they're inoculated is first and foremost, but obviously we want to get people back to work. I'm in the food service industry, trying to keep my business going throughout the pandemic. And obviously I've got workers in there who, we want to keep healthy. We want to keep our patrons healthy. And it's really important that, we inoculate the workers that have been, on the front lines every day. Especially teachers. Teachers are, going to work every day, ensuring that our children are being educated. That's our upcoming workforce. And so we want to make sure that we keep our students in school and keep our teachers safe and healthy, as well as, in turn, the students. So that's all really important. I just want to touch upon a couple of things. You asked at the beginning, what sort of plans we have to try and help our small businesses. And, certainly in the broad scheme, we need to really be looking at what sort of grant dollars we can infuse in addition to PPP, which will be a tremendous help for small businesses. I know the Restaurant Association is working on some grants as well, which is fantastic. And we really need to be looking at how we can relieve some of the fees and unnecessary expenses that small businesses incur. I have a bill, SB 637, that looks to exempt sales and use tax on PPE, something that small businesses have, obviously had to increase their purchasing on those items. I'm also co-sponsoring a bill that would exempt certain businesses from fees and licensure fees and whatnot. We need to be thinking creatively about and listening to our businesses about what they need right now and how we we can relieve some of the burden they're feeling. Workforce development, we heard, I'm the vice chair of the Commerce Committee. We heard from the Workforce Development Council the other day. They're doing some great work, hit the ground running after the governor, put them in place in the summer of last year, and definitely want to see that continue. And I'm sure that my colleagues feel the same. It's such an important piece of this, making sure that we have a trained workforce, getting them skilled in core competencies. We saw great success with the Skill Up program as well. And so we need to really keep those things moving. And lastly, I'll just say, and I know I'm taking up a lot of time, but again, touching on these things just has me thinking in terms of UI, unemployment insurance. We really need to, push our federal delegation. And I know I joined several colleagues in doing so to create, turn those unemployment loans into grants rather, making sure that unemployment insurance, the deficits that we will surely face do not fall on the backs of our small business owners in any way, shape, or form. No special assessments, no, increased fees. We just have to make sure that we're replenishing that, and really pushing our federal delegation to help us secure those funds to replenish.
Great, thank you. And it's okay that you go over a little bit, because unlike in the past years where we've had both senators and and House reps on one big panel, we have 7 of you all today. So we have a little bit more time to sit with each one of you. Before we jump away from the coronavirus situation, anyone else from some of the other communities, especially the more urban communities, want to jump into that? Are we seeing the delivery of the vaccines? Is it happening in those areas as well, where a more susceptible population is going on? Senator Cabrera, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Apologize for having to jump out. I'm having a little work done on my house. So I'm a little distracted because I got people working on my house. So, but I had to step away. But yeah, I just wanted to jump in quickly on the vaccine front. I think it's fair to say that all of us would like to see that happen faster, of course. In terms of the rollout, there is, I believe, more communication that needs to be done. And we're seeing some vaccine reluctance, particularly among Black and Brown communities. And I think, if we're going to get to a point where we can start to see the vaccines make their way, we really have to do, I think, a better job of educating the communities, making them aware of it. So I'd like to see more on that. Senator Cohen's point, married to an educator, I think getting the teachers vaccinated as fast as possible is critical. And I think that's connected to helping our economy get back on its feet, because many of our educators, need to get back into the classroom. I know many of them want to, but they want to do so safely. And a lot of the workers that a lot of our small and mid-sized businesses depend on, for many of them, schools being open are critical to them having the support for their children. In my district, I meet lots of workers, and I hear it all the time. I get emails all the time of how difficult it is for them to juggle the fact that the schools are closed. Many of them who don't have the option of working from Zoom will have to show up for work, and that's an extra burden. And then workforce development, which was mentioned, I think is really, really critical and important. That's something I'm really focused on. I really see us providing not only our small businesses the support that they need as we transition back, but also supporting our workers, which the business community depends on, whether it's the childcare, the vaccinations, or them having the skills necessary to do the job that they're hired to do. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking.
Great, thank you.
If I could jump in real quick and on the vaccine question and equity.
Senator Winfield.
Yeah. I think to be honest, that's still an open question. There was an article in the CT Mirror yesterday that reflects many of the questions that we have in the urban community, particularly those who represent them, about the structure of rolling out the vaccines, and if the structure is not meant to be, but happens to be inequitable, right? When we talk about those who are over 65 and putting them first, we know that many of the people who've had to work, the people who I talked about in the last question, are younger people. They tend to be more people of color who are in the service sector. And so they're exposed in a way that even those people over 65 aren't necessarily. And we know that what it means is that their exposure and their rate becomes equivalent to what happens with those who are over 65. And when we roll out the vaccine in a way that we think about them first, because taking out the question of work, that would make sense, then we potentially create inequity. And so I think we have to do some deeper dive on that question. I don't think it's necessarily about intention, but I think a lot of times the question of equity comes into play because we haven't thought about the impact of what it is we're doing.
Thank you. Okay. So a lot of what the new administration in Washington has talked about is infrastructure, which we've talked about here time and time again. And our transportation fund is not great shape, as we all know. One of the key things that each state can do as this infrastructure bill, if it is to come down the pike, is around, is to have sort of basically shovel-ready projects ready to go. What can we do as a state to have as many of those possible projects sort of lined up so they're in that position to go? We know about there's a number of rail projects that we have to get to, airport projects we have to get to, highway projects we have to get to. So, you know, what can we be doing now to line them up so if that money comes, we're ready to go? We'd like to, Senator Looney.
Well, I think we do have projects lined up. Our DOT for a number of years has been listing priority projects. And the part of the problem is going back several administrations, our DOT has been sort of hollowed out from within, going back to the Rowland administration, where capacity was diminished by the retirement and not replacement of project managers, engineers, and the like, so that so much more of that work had to be contracted out, resulting, as remember some years ago, the debacle in I-84 in Waterbury when the drains were improperly installed, the whole project had to be redone. And we found out in investigating that not only was the work contracted out, the supervision of the work had been contracted out. And that's a problem. So we need to make sure we have capacity to undertake the projects that are in the pipeline once the funding comes. And I know that Governor Lamont is sensitive to that. We will be working with our federal legislators and the Biden administration on that, because obviously a significant amount of infrastructure funding does have to come through the federal highway funds and other federal transportation accounts. But I think that's going to be critical for us. We do have ongoing infrastructure needs. We are an older state in terms of our development stage. We have lots of infrastructure that is aging, needs to be replaced, needs to be repaired. If I might return just briefly to the previous discussion on business and workforce development. You know, 10 years ago, we had a special session in 2011. It was a bipartisan session on jobs creation and workforce development. And out of that came not only the Small Business Express program, but also a program that was called the Step Up program that then Republican Minority Leader Larry Cafaro and I worked on together. And that was one that provided some subsidies to small employers. And this was, of course, coming out of the Great Recession that began in 2008. And we were beginning to recover. And the concern was that many small businesses might be ready to start to ramp up by hiring new employees, but were not yet comfortable in doing that because they weren't comfortable with the state of the economy. And that program partly subsidized new workers that would be hired for a period of up to 6 months, so that during that period of time, the employer could make a judgment as to whether that employee did add value to that business or not, and make a decision at the end of 6 months where the subsidy would expire, that was an employee worth keeping on. So I would hope that we could replenish that program as well, because that was particularly targeted to small businesses hiring people. Later it was expanded somewhat, and there was a special subcategory of it for veterans. But I think that is a model program that we should revisit. Also, in terms of job training, we have had many job training programs in the state over the years, some of which have been successful. Some seemed, in some cases, to be training people in a vacuum and not really preparing them for the actual job force. So I would point to the workplace program in Bridgeport, run by Joe Carbone, as a model of an effective job training program with their Platform to Employment program that's been run successfully for a number of years, and look upon replicating that model as an effective job training program that both matches up skills training with the actual jobs that are available in the economy.
Thank you. Well, one thing you mentioned with the DOT, that they needed people that are engineers. That might be an opportunity to give some incentives to our existing young people that are at our great universities and colleges throughout our own state to think about staying here, coming to work for our DOT for those projects, and sort of keeping our young people here, which in turn adds more to our economy because they'll buy houses, buy cars, go out and spend money.
And that's right. It's interesting. And in terms of engineers, it is true that apart from UConn, it is mostly the private universities in Connecticut that provide those engineers and other people who are majors or in science and technological fields. So that's why we need to look at our whole higher ed system, and not only the public system, in terms of plugging them into our economic development initiatives.
Great. Let's talk about the revenue side of things. Despite the initial projections of $1 billion deficit, we actually, from what I heard from our house reps, we have a small surplus. It looks as if our receipts from the income tax and from the sales tax were actually up surprisingly. Now, that just may be a funny blip right now, but what has changed there, do you think, and how are we still going to deal with at some point our long-term deficit issues that we're having? Who'd like to jump into that? I'll open that up. Senator Kelly?
Well, obviously, whenever you hear, that's good news. But, we're going to have to drill down on those numbers, see exactly what it's from and whether that's a sustained, I'm going to say, event, or whether it's just an isolated issue. The fact of the matter is, in the out years, the biennium that we're going to be facing, there still are structural deficits. And those structural deficits include things like unfunded pension obligations and liabilities that have been put on future generations that we have to start getting our arms around. Because after all, when we start to have those types of obligations, what it does is it starts crowding out, because those are I'm going to say, mandated costs, starts crowding out core services of government, which is not what we want to do. And we do want to get our Connecticut economy going, and getting our workforce in a place so that we can thrive. I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about what Senator Looney was talking about, which is the workforce development. There are some areas, and when we talk about, for instance, engineering, engineers come from, as he referenced, a lot of the private schools. But what we need to do is get the engineers to come from the public schools so that we can get middle class kids into good paying jobs. And one thing that I've always found interesting is that we have, Sikorsky Aircraft, Pratt and Whitney. We do really good at aerospace, but yet there's no aeronautical engineering degree at the University of Connecticut. So a kid in Stratford can't go to the, UConn and then work in his hometown building the world's best helicopter. And we really have to work on getting that pathway from your house to a better economy. And that's one of the initiatives, and we've looked at and at 2011, that whole workforce development came from an acknowledgement that we didn't have, after, I'm going to say, a 30 to 40, 50-year-old workforce. We didn't have anybody coming new into the pipeline, both in manufacturing, which is where I think we need more, but also in the insurance industry. When I was chairman of insurance, we put together a forum, and the insurance industry came to us and said, look, we need more actuaries. We need more of the best and the brightest. We have the institutional knowledge here in Connecticut, but we don't have a lot of young folks coming in to I'm going to say, refill these positions as the workforce ages out. This, to me, is something that is just a no-brainer. And for a number of years, we would pass a task force, but the task force would never get appointed and moved forward. These are the types of things, like when I started, I said we have to, first do no harm, but also look at what we do well and start to grow that footprint, because that is what Connecticut is known for. And if we can attract people and get our economy going, I think we can resolve a lot of the fiscal issues that we have and that plague our budget.
Okay.
I'd love to just, can I add
Senator Cohen.
that too? Because Senator Kelly makes some good points and highlights, where some of our focus, where we can really hone in manufacturing. But I also would be remiss in not mentioning bioscience and biotech, which just has exploded. We knew it was exploding prior to the pandemic. And, if there's a bright lining in all of this, which, it's hard to find them as people are dying and getting sick, it's that our Connecticut bio companies have really stepped up to the plate and creating jobs, constantly. We're really seeing new startups. What we've seen in terms of business startups during the pandemic in Connecticut has really been incredible and unexpected, quite frankly. So while we have so many businesses that are struggling, we do have good stories to tell in terms of new business startups to new business ventures and job creation. So I do want to mention that. And in terms of the budget, we're seeing, this is a great story for Connecticut right now, seeing our deficits that would be devastated being turned around by capital gains tax receipts. And, our spending line is down because of, higher Medicaid reimbursements and so many factors at play here. And so, as we go to craft this budget, we have our max and the rainy day fund, and we've been able to use some dollars to put towards pensions. As Senator Kelly mentioned, that's huge for us in Connecticut. We really have to be focusing in on how to pay down those pensions that were long overdue, decades of mismanagement, and now we're really as a legislature needing to focus in on how we correct those years of mismanagement. How do we move forward? And I think we have a really good story to tell right now. The dollars on hand with which to help our economy get moving again. So I think we're in a good place, much better place than any of us had anticipated in going in to craft this biennial budget.
Senator Winfield has his hand up, so
Yeah,
he does
sorry.
it right. So I'm going to go to him.
I just wanted to add in addition, not to counter anybody's point, but often in these conversations, we will mention UConn, but not the 4 universities, which we used to talk about as universities of opportunity. If equity is a question on the table, they have to necessarily be actively added into the conversation. I would say even beyond that, there are other colleges that may not sit in that place, but they allow for people who have to have already entered the workforce to be able to attend college in ways that the way the conversation lays out doesn't always happen. So I think we have to have an eye towards that as well.
Thank you. Okay. One of the things you mentioned in terms of telling our story, there's a couple things on that. One is that we had this huge influx of our neighbors from New York City who realized that during a pandemic, being in New York City was not necessarily the best thing. We've seen a lot of sales of residences. How do we sort of capitalize on that? Many of these people, as they've come here, they may become permanent residences. Connecticut has a lot of tourism that I don't think necessarily tell the story about. There's lots of venues that when the COVID has been conquered, we can go back to the wineries and the breweries and things like that and get people out. How do we get that message out to them and others that, Connecticut really is a great place to live. There's lots to do, and all within a very short distance of where you may be living. Anyone?
I don't want to. Oh, James, you
Go
got.
ahead.
I
No,
see.
go ahead.
You could go, Christine.
No,
I'll follow.
With the
Okay.
silence, I thought I'd jump in, but I don't
Yeah.
want to dominate the conversation. This is something that I'm passionate about. And I think we already are seeing the benefits of those sales, sort of a migration from the city that is Manhattan and into Connecticut, which is a great story. It's why we've seen, it's wonderful. I'm a member of the Tourism Caucus, and Senator Formica and Representative Boer had that up, and we just had our first meeting the other day, and talking about just this very thing. What can we do And I would just offer that I think all of us are focused on that. We hadn't traditionally done such a great job of marketing Connecticut, and I think we all recognize that. We did a much better job during the pandemic, unbelievably, really getting Connecticut residents to get out and explore local business in a safe way. And I think we'll continue in that vein. How do we promote the small businesses that are really going to need our help in getting back up and running?
Mhm.
You mentioned wineries, which we have fantastic wineries here in Connecticut. Farm wineries we have a rich agricultural history here. How do we keep that going? Getting folks aware of what we have to offer here. Craft breweries really huge now in Connecticut. We're sort of taking over for Vermont, branding ourselves the craft brewery state, which is really exciting. And just restaurants, so many state parks and beaches, trails. We just really have it all. And I think we absolutely do need to do a really good job of advertising and getting the word out that we have wonderful education systems, as Senator Winfield mentioned. We have wonderful new jobs that have been created in so many different sectors: manufacturing, bio, as I mentioned. And this is just a fantastic place to raise a family. Education, K through 12, is phenomenal, and secondary schools as well. So it's a great story to tell, and we ought to be screaming it from the rooftops.
Okay. Senator Maroney, you wanted to second?
Yeah, no, I think that right now I've heard a figure of maybe 70,000 people have moved into the state from New York. So we have 70,000 ambassadors to hopefully reach back to their fellow New Yorkers to let them know about here. I think, as Senator Cohen mentioned, I think one of the big things during the start of the pandemic, at least, is we had a lot more people utilizing our state parks, right, and getting out. And that's something that I would really like to see more of. At some of my office hours, even before the pandemic, I had the regular coffee hours, and I had a few people from New York, and they're like, there's no hiking here. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's hiking everywhere. And so one of the things we did is we put together a map of all of the trails and water access in my district that we put out for them. But I'd like to see us do that statewide. And they have actually, DECD has created a website for younger, I think it's CT for me, but to try to recruit millennials to get them to move here. I think another thing from the strategic work plan that's exciting, which if you haven't read the strategic workforce plan, I think it's probably the most exciting government document I've ever written, and that it's comprehensive and thorough. It's a low bar, I understand, but one of the things they're looking at is engaging Campus Philly and advising and setting up pilots in 3 towns. And what Campus Philly has done is it's helped Philadelphia retain more of the college students who go in there to stay in Philadelphia afterwards. And one of the things in this, when I was meeting with someone in New Haven at Elm City Innovations, he had said they did a survey of the companies that were started at the through the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. Half left, half stayed. And of the reason that the company stayed, one of the main reasons was forming a bond beyond the university, right? They became connected to the community. And so that's what a program like Campus Philly, or expanding the UPass so that people are getting out and seeing more of the state and realizing that we do have so much so close, right? And that there are so many different things you can do. We have top schools. We have great higher education. I think with the higher education, I saw someone put in the chat, and I had been thinking this, so I want to mention it as well, is that our private colleges graduate almost half of the students with bachelor's degrees in the state, and they're not just all upper class students, they're middle class students. I'm a graduate of a private college here, and even a lot of students who need extensive financial aid graduate, and they do a great job of getting these students in and getting them through, because oftentimes they're smaller and have the advice to make sure that those kids can graduate who may fall through the cracks. So I think we have to look at the private colleges as part of the solution, as well as our public colleges. But I think we need to make things just like, really with anything, make information easier for people to find about all of the opportunities here. And we need to have pride in our state. I think one of the great things about this pandemic, if you could say there's anything great about it, but I've seen a lot of pride in people for the first time in a while, that I'm really proud of how our state is handling this. And we see that we're leading the country in a lot of things. And I think it's not just that response that we have to be proud of. We have, as we said, great schools, we have great parks, we have great breweries. I don't drink wine, so I can't comment as to the wineries, but I have been to many of the breweries. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I jump to Senator Ciccarelli, I really do echo the thought of getting this information out, especially online, because that's where the young people go. I mean, I had never gone up the Farmington Canal between Cheshire and the upper part of Cheshire. Lived here my whole life. Been to parts in Hampden, and my wife and I, back in the fall, took a bike ride up there, stopped at some of the breweries. I was so impressed with. I thought it was something like that you'd see in California. It was beautifully laid out. It was all these places to stop and rest and get a drink of water, whatever. And it was filled with all manner of people, young, old, every color you can imagine. I said, this is really great. This is something that, can bring people together, these public trails and parks. So it's something to get out there, because we have a lot of assets. So Senator Ciccarelli, would you like to jump on? You have your hand up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment briefly on the influx of people coming in from New York, which is great. But we don't want to discount the fact that there are a substantial amount of middle-class people that are on the breaking point of leaving because they cannot afford it here. So, I come from an athletic background, and when I was, just getting in the lead of any kind of a competition, that gave me motivation to push forward and work a little harder. I think we need to do the same thing as a state and find a creative way to make sure we can make it affordable for our middle class, because, the 70,000 people coming in, there could be 100,000 leaving tomorrow if we do not control our spending to make sure it's affordable for them to stay here. So we really have to work hard now and take advantage of that lead, if you will. So we really have to work together to do that.
Let me keep with you a minute. There was a recent proposal that we saw in the paper. I think Senator Looney was talking about it. The sort of the statewide property tax on, I don't know if the right, who termed this, but on mansions, and the number of value of the house was something like $500,000. What are your thoughts on that?
So any tax on the middle class, and when you say the middle class, somebody that lives in a $400,000 home in Fairfield, you ask them, they would be considered middle class, in my opinion. And the increase in living expenses right now is just not what we need. We need to find a creative way to reduce our spending to make up for whatever money that we may need from that tax. Again, $500,000 house in Connecticut is far from a mansion.
Yeah, if I might answer, get in on
Yeah,
that, since you referred
I
to
knew Senator Looney that you'd want to respond.
Yeah,
to
since you referred to my proposal, that should not be looked at in isolation. That's part of a package of property tax relief. Because what we recognize that it is the property tax in Connecticut that people find the most burdensome, more than any tax that is levied directly by the state. And partly it's because the state hasn't had the resources through its revenue structure to provide adequate funding to municipalities in a whole host of areas. So that proposal about having a 1 mil added on, but only to properties over a certain level, say $500,000 or so, it's tied to funding for a revision of our pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, where the state partially reimburses municipalities for the tax exempt property owned by colleges and hospitals and the state itself. Right now, that formula is really inequitable, because when the legislature sets whatever level of pilot it's going to fund in a given year, that pilot reimbursement for pilot eligible property goes to every municipality at the same level. So Greenwich gets the same level of pilot reimbursement for Greenwich Hospital as New Haven gets for New Haven, for Yellow Haven, and Hartford gets for Hartford Hospital. The proposal that I have would set up 3 tiers of pilot reimbursement: 50%, 40%, 30%. Right now, they're all reimbursed at approximately 25% for college and hospital, and even less than that for state property. And what it would do is provide a recognition that there's so much property that is not taxable in many communities that host these institutions or have state property, so that that program would cost $114 million to implement, to revise pilot. To do that, we have to have other revenue to deal with it. So I think a property tax that would be levied by the state and applied toward that pilot program would, in the end, benefit most taxpayers. Under that program, 32 municipalities would be at the 50% level. 101 would be at the 40% level, which is substantially more than now. And then the other 36 or so would be held harmless at their current level. So what that is, while people talk about that in isolation, it has to be looked at as a package of property tax reform. I'm hoping that the governor will embrace parts of this or come up with his own proposal, because back in 2018 in the campaign, he also said that property tax reform was a priority item for him. So I'm hoping to hear something from him on that score this year as well.
Senator, let me just stay with that a minute. Is there any movement within that legislation or thoughts on the legislation to look at maybe broader tax reform, where you're looking at maybe eliminating some of the exemptions that they have, so that that properties that pay nothing right now might pay a 1%, because those properties do in fact get police protection, fire protection, public works plow their streets. I mean, you know, a building that's a charitable building still gets services from its communities and does not contribute on any level. So there's many people that think that we're at that point where we should be looking at that as well.
Well, I think that is something that the legislature will look at. I know the city of Bridgeport a few years ago was so concerned about property being taken off its grand list by nonprofits. And of course, we do not have pilot for every charitable use. There's no pilot for churches. There's no pilot for other kinds of entities that are nonprofit and provide social services. It's only provided for colleges, hospitals, and the state's own property. There's a separate pilot for prison-owned property, for state-owned prison property and other communities. But what Bridgeport was concerned about a number of years ago, they wanted to try to set up a program to block more nonprofits from owning property. They wanted their nonprofits to be tenants of people who would pay property taxes on that property, and then let the nonprofits be rent-paying tenants rather than taking property off the grand list by owning property itself. So I think that's obviously up for discussion this year, because you're right, there has been in many ways a sort of creep into nonprofit ownership that has removed more and more properties from the list. And while they do provide a valuable service, in many cases it is a burden on the host community.
Senator Ciccarelli, you have your hand up. Did you still want to say something?
I apologize. That was from before.
Okay. No problem. Senator Kelly, I know you want to get a word in.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if we want to bring equity to the pilot tax or tax structure, let's look at that. But adding a tax increase on middle-class residential homes and commercial property, I don't think is a way to do that. It's going to increase costs. It's like taking the money out of one pocket and putting it in the other pocket, and that doesn't salt the pot. Particularly when you heard earlier that the current budget is in surplus, yet we're coming back to levy. You know, there's a bill to levy an additional state real property tax. At the same time, all we hear from our constituents is that the tax on their home is unaffordable right now. This is going to make it more unaffordable. And a house that's about $400,000 of value is not a mansion. And we have these homes in all our communities across the state of Connecticut. But what I think this audience needs to also know is that this is going to levy that $1 mil on commercial property as well. So once again, Hartford is going to be taking money that's normally used in tax that for your local communities. It's going to take that money and pull it out of your local community and send it to Hartford to then redistribute back to the communities that they choose those resources to go. And we need to think long and hard about giving more control of our local communities to Hartford, rather than taking what I'm going to say, the initiatives under our own control. I think local government nearest to the people is the best government. And we need to make sure that we continue to have nice, good local communities, because that's what makes Connecticut the great state it is. It's the people and the places that we have, and we'd like to maintain that and make sure that that is the Connecticut that we all know and love going forward.
Thank you. I know that Garrett has signaled me he's going to want to jump in with some of the questions from the audience. So at this point, Garrett, if you want to jump in with those questions, I know that Senator Cohen had to leave at, I believe had to leave at 9. I don't think she's on now, right? Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have not questions in the chat right now, but please add your questions in. I know there's a few in there. We'll get to those. I did want to touch back on the public option. I know that's going to be a big issue coming into the legislature. Senator Kelly touched upon that a little bit before, and that was a proposal last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago, that did not end up getting approved. Senator Looney, where does the public option stand, and do you expect this to pass this year, and why would we want to do this?
Well, first of all, I think we need to look at it as something that is not quite a public option in the sense that it is not a plan that would be run entirely by the state itself. The concept was to have it structured by the state, put out to bid, and ask companies to participate in it under the guidelines set by the state. But the reality is that we have to recognize that we have to find ways to make insurance more affordable to people, both individuals and to small businesses. We have many small businesses that, and Senator Cohen often likes to talk about this when she's on, that struggle to provide insurance to their employees, but are not able to because of the prohibitive cost. Many people have insurance policies that are very expensive, both because of high copays and also because of very high deductibles. We have to do better for that and that for our people, because the reality is that for many people in our state, they said, "Do you have health insurance?" And the answer may be yes, but it is very much a qualified yes. What it is really is catastrophic insurance. Many people have policies that really pay them virtually nothing in the course of the year because their deductibles are so high, their copays are so high that only when they have a serious illness or hospitalization does their coverage kick in. Most of the rest of the year they're paying out of pocket. And that's not the situation that we want people to be in. So we have to continue to push for better policies, both under the Affordable Care Act, under Access Health, and through looking at an option like this. In terms of reinsurance, I agree with Senator Kelly. That's something we should also be looking into. There was a proposal to do that, but I believe 2 years ago there was reluctance on the part of the Senate Republican caucus to have fees imposed on some of the insurance companies that to help structure this program. And I think that's what has happened in terms of that, but I'm certainly willing to explore that as well.
And Senator Kelly, did you want to jump in on that? And then we'll get other people involved as well.
No, absolutely. You know, the public option is a problem because it's really not insurance. It's a government program that participants pay a fee to participate in, and it's modeled after the partnership plan that the comptroller currently administers for municipalities and nonprofits, and it has continued to run in the red. And unlike an insurance company, the public option, the partnership plan, is backed or is paid for by, when it goes into the red, netting tax. That's you and me. It's not regulated by the Department of Insurance and isn't really covered by all the protections of the Affordable Care Act. Now, 8 years ago, Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act and promised affordable, quality, accessible care. And many families in Connecticut realized that the premiums they pay rival a mortgage. It's no way affordable. And this is why. So we've proposed this reinsurance plan that Senator Looney talked about. And one of the reasons it didn't pass was it waited to the last day of the session at the last hour, when this is the first and primary focus.
I don't know how to do this.
Okay, well, leave it alone.
And families, this should have been the first issue that was handled in the legislature, not the last.
Yeah, okay.
But as to the issue of payment, this is, typical. We see that when government lays a levy, whether it's a tax, a fee, an assessment on a product, it increases its cost. And in this insurance area, not only does it increase the cost for families who are already paying high premium, but it also reduces the amount of federal resources and funds that we can bring back to the state of Connecticut. That's why we'd rather pay for this through a general fund appropriation, to make sure that we not only keep the cost of premiums low, but we also leverage more federal dollars to ease the burden for Connecticut residents. But what is most important about our bill is that it not only deals with premium relief, it also gets its arms around the medical costs and the drivers of why insurance costs so much, as well as keeping, once again, working and partnering with the Connecticut insurance industry to keep the good paying Connecticut jobs. I think that's the big issue. Ours can keep jobs. The public option goes into direct competition with our flagship industry and will cost Connecticut jobs.
Thanks, Senator Kelly. I don't know if Senator Cabrera is still there, but if he is, wanted to throw out a question to you, and if not, we'll grab one of the other senators. We did have a question in the chat, and I know this has come up. One of the questions about how the state is distributing CARES Act money to small businesses, whether it's restaurants. Obviously, that's a big boon to a lot of small businesses. But there's been, as we've gone through the process, definitely a debate as to how the state chooses to spend that federal money that comes in. So Senator Cabrera is there. I know he's got some things going on around the House, but if not, Senator Maroney, if you want to jump in on that.
Well, it seems like Senator Cabrera is busy, so I guess I'll jump in, and then after this, I actually do have to get going because I have a committee meeting or a public hearing that I'm running in a little bit. So, you know, I think that each state has done things a little differently. I think what happened with the state grant program, the $5,000 grant program, it was oversubscribed. We had, I believe, twice as many applications as they had expected for that. And because, you know, I own a small business as well, and I own a small business that not only that the industry has kind of disappeared at my business. I work in test prep, and with the tests, more colleges going test optional and tests getting canceled, it definitely has been a struggle to stay open and to you know, to pay my employee, pay for her insurance, which has been my priority during this. So I do understand the plight of the businesses. You know, as far as what we're looking to do for restaurants, I'm on the co-chair of the General Law Committee. And so one of the things we're looking to do is some of the executive orders that the governor has done have been very well received in terms of allowing restaurants to do takeout with the sealed containers of alcoholic beverages, allowing liquor stores to do curbside pickup. And so we're looking at trying to extend some of those to give them some time to hopefully make back some of the money that they lost in the past year. We do have a bill to extend that for 3 years, which is based off of Michigan had done that with the sunset clause. But I think one of the things in terms of allowing the executive orders is we are technically a part-time legislature. So while we are in session now, we weren't until January 6th, right? And so speed was of the essence. So the governor had to act. I think for many businesses would agree, we needed the money more quickly, and we didn't have the time to call in a special session and allow the legislature to vote on some of these things. So, but there is a lot that we do need to do to make sure that there are industries. I did see someone in the chats mention the arts. Our nonprofits and the arts especially have been hard hit because we can't gather. They can't have fundraisers. We can't have people coming in. So, and as Senator Looney alluded to before, as a state, we cannot go into deficit, right? The federal government can spend in deficit, but as the state, we cannot. So we're going to have to look at being creative with ways for helping these. So whether it's creating pools of bonded money or other you know, forgivable loans to grants, but that is of the essence that we get these things back up and running, and especially with the arts, which is actually a boon to the restaurants. People go into a play at the Schubert in New Haven, and then they'll eat out at a restaurant there, or to Long Wharf or somewhere. So we do need to make sure that we keep that vibrant arts community going.
Great, thanks, Senator Maroney. Senator Chicarella, and we'll wrap up in just a moment. I want to just ask you a question. I saw come across the newspaper the other day, a proposed bill that would regulate how businesses compensate employees who are working from home. Anytime that state legislature is getting into some of these business issues, there's obviously some concern. Is that a bill that you expect to pass? Is that something that businesses should be looking out for?
To be completely honest, I have not seen that, but based upon your and I prior conversation, I think it's should be left up to the businesses to decide the compensation of their employees. But I have not reviewed that, so I can't speak to that. I do apologize. Do you have a bill number?
I don't, and I should say there are at this point in time a lot of bills that are proposed in committees. Many of them won't go forward, and so to be able to keep up with all of the hundreds of bills. But one last thing is we're going to try to move into a chat if you guys are able to stick around for a moment. But just how should businesses interact with the legislature this session? Obviously, it's very different. Not in the building. Zoom is how things are being done. What's the best way for our businesses to stay in touch with you?
So continue to reach out. I'm getting calls all the time and emails to our state website. So I'm new to this, so I don't know what it was like before. But from my understanding, instead of doing in-person testimony, there's going to be a way to access a Skype link, and you could give statements and testimony on bills that you want to speak about or that may affect you. And I believe the website should be up and running shortly. As of yesterday, I don't think it's properly prepared, but maybe somebody a little bit more senior could explain that, because that is very important. And I don't mean by age, guys. Senator Looney, I don't mean, and Kevin Kelly, Senator Kelly, I don't mean by age. I don't want to get in trouble here.
Well, there is a way. The public hearings will be virtual, and there will be a sign-up process for them through the General Assembly's website. Actually, there will be a longer period to sign up now that they're virtual. Once the committee hearing is posted, it'll be possible for people to sign up until the cutoff point prior to the start of the hearing. Under the old system, you had to often sign up the morning of a hearing and queue up very early to get signed in. But we are, at least for the time being, having to do everything on a virtual basis. It'll also be possible to connect by phone to public hearings. So, and then of course to submit testimony by email as well, or written. So the possibility of the kinds of communications with the committees for people to get their views before the committees in the public hearing process is still there. But what won't be possible is the public gathering of large numbers of people in the Capitol for a public hearing. But we are still very much committed to a public engagement process through limited though it is to being online. It will be difficult. You might have a committee public hearing of 10 legislators in 10 different kitchens or dining rooms around the state, all engaged in listening to public testimony at the same time. So a certain degree of spontaneity and interaction among the members is sacrificed for the safety that we need to have. But it will allow for public engagement, and as I said, to some extent, it might actually be easier for the public to get signed up, and then, of course, they won't have to be sitting in a committee room for 7 or 8 hours waiting to be called to give their testimony.
And if I just could follow up on that, that was one of the questions we didn't get to, was that in light of the pandemic, there's lots of things that we did to accommodate the need to keep separate from each other, and for public health reasons. Some of the things that we did, I think many people feel benefited public access, benefited communication, are there, and as well as some of the rules that were sort of lifted on other matters. Is there some thought to making some of these things permanent? Like you said, having a virtual meeting allows people at every corner of the state not to have to drive anywhere, reduces their carbon footprint, but allows them to sort of come in and either send the comments and watch what's going on a little bit easier. So just people are urging, I think, this session to look at some of those things going forward.
Well, I think we will be, and of course, this session will give us an experience of how it works in practice, and we'll know better how to evaluate it as we get closer to the end of the session.
Senator Kelly?
Yeah, while there are some advantages, I mean, yes, it takes, I'm going to say, it brings the legislative session to folks who are all over the state of Connecticut who have the privilege of connectivity. The governor just announced earlier this week that there's almost 25% of Connecticut does not have connectivity. Mm-hmm. So as we go forward, keep in mind, maybe we have the ability to have this technology. There are folks that don't. So if a neighbor doesn't have that capability, maybe you're an employee doesn't have that capability at home, maybe allow them to participate at work or to get their communication through in that manner. The other thing is this whole, where does an industry like, you have chambers of commerce. There are days at the legislature where the chambers come up and they're all together, and that makes a political statement. It's a First Amendment statement, and it's palpable. You can see it, feel it, touch it. Where does that go in the virtual world? It's not the same. There's a lot different going through, I'm going to say, a crowd of individuals and feeling whether they're supporting what you're doing or against what you're doing. And that's a political statement. And sometimes people don't want to be on the front line. Maybe they don't want their name and phone number and email address captured and known and to be on the point of an issue. They'd rather just show up at the corner of the legislature as the legislators drive by to show a sign, yes or no, or to be one of a larger group that says, hey, we want you to be favorable to realtors or small business or whatever. And those are different ways to get your point across. And that's lost in this. And we can't ever lose human contact, because I think that's what's essential to keeping our communities, the great places they are, but unified and together. I think it's when people get to see and eyeball one another, it brings us closer together, not further apart. So as we go forward, yes, there's things we've learned in COVID that are good, but we can't forget those great things that we had before, so that after this, maybe the combination makes us better.
Thank you.
Senator Looney, Senator Kelly, Senator Ciccarella, and I know we lost some of our other senators as well, but a busy day and they had to get to committee sessions. Thank you so much for doing this. If you do have a few minutes, we're going to open up another meeting room afterwards, but understand if you need to move on. I do want to thank again all of our sponsors who have helped us put on this event: AT&T, Southern Connecticut State University, Asa Abloy, Holler and Sage, Alexion, ACES, and PSEG. Thank you so much. We are putting in the chat the link to go to the meeting room afterwards. And again, if any of our senators can join us, we'll be there just for a few minutes if anyone wants to speak with them. And any of you in the audience who want to join us. And while people move over there, I do just want to remind everyone that we're starting our executive orientation program on Friday. And also please sign up for our internship, career, and jobs fair coming up in late February. And finally, this afternoon, we'll be doing our Women's Achievement Awards with the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce, expecting a great event with the Lieutenant Governor. You can still sign up for that event. You can go to the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce website. Thank you again, everyone. And thank you to our senators for being here with us. And Jim, thanks. Great job along with the Government Affairs Committee. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You know, back on.
You want to get back on?
No, I don't think so. I'm done.